Have you ever wondered, what exactly is going on inside the mind of someone who is racist? What do racist people actually think and believe that makes them discriminate against others based on race, especially against black people? They rarely see themselves as villains. Most believe they're just being realistic, protecting their group, or stating obvious facts. So what is the psychology of racism really like? In this video, we're going deep into the psychology of racism, exploring the hidden thoughts and mental shortcuts that fuel it, when and where racism has been at its absolute worst, including against black people, who tends to engage in it the most, what science has uncovered about why people become racist, and most importantly, how research shows we can actually reduce it and eventually end it. Stick around, because the answers might surprise you, and they could change how you see the world. Let's start with the basics of what racists think. According to decades of psychological research, racism isn't usually about outright evil. It's often rooted in normal brain processes that get twisted by culture and experience. Social identity theory, developed by psychologist Henri Tajfel in the 1970s, explains a big part of it. People naturally divide the world into us versus them to boost their own self-esteem. Even in lab experiments with totally made-up groups, participants quickly favor their in-group and discriminate against the out-group. When race gets added, especially black versus white, that same mechanism turns into real prejudice. Racists often believe deeply in hierarchies, that some groups, like white people, are naturally superior in intelligence, work ethic, or morality, while others, like black people, are not. This mindset is strongly linked to social dominance orientation, a personality trait where people prefer strict social rankings and see inequality as normal or even good. They also score higher on right-wing authoritarianism, craving order and fearing outsiders as threats to their way of life. Many don't feel hate every second. Instead, they use mental shortcuts called stereotypes. Black people are lazy or dangerous, as quick ways to navigate a complex world. Research shows these beliefs often come from personal insecurity, lack of empathy for outsiders, or a defensive need to protect their own group's image. They project their fears onto black people and convince themselves their views are just common sense. But where did this all begin? The psychology of racism as we know it today is surprisingly modern. Before the 1500s, people had prejudices based on religion, tribe, or culture, but the idea of race as a fixed biological hierarchy was invented during European exploration and the transatlantic slave trade. Europeans needed a moral excuse to enslave millions of Africans. By the 1700s and 1800s, scientific racism took over, ranking white Europeans at the top and black Africans at the bottom. Early psychologists even joined in, calling black people childlike or inferior. This wasn't fringe thinking. It shaped laws and science for centuries. Racism hit its most extreme peaks in the 19th and 20th centuries. In the United States, after slavery ended in 1865, Jim Crow laws from the 1890s through the 1960s enforced legal segregation, lynching, and second-class status specifically for black Americans. Across the ocean, Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945 turned racial pseudoscience into the Holocaust. South Africa's apartheid system from 1948 to 1994 created an entire legal structure of racial separation between white and black people that lasted even longer than Jim Crow. These were times when ordinary people, not just extremists, enforced racism against black people because their leaders framed it as natural, scientific, and necessary for survival. The psychology here was clear. When power structures reward in-group loyalty and punish empathy, normal people can commit horrific acts while believing they're doing the right thing. So where is racism strongest today? Global surveys paint a complicated picture. A 2025 Pew Research study across dozens of countries found a median of 34% of adults say racial or ethnic discrimination is a very big problem, with the highest concerns in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, Turkey, India, and parts of Asia. In the United States, while explicit bias against black people has dropped sharply since the civil rights era, many Americans still say black people face at least some discrimination. The same in-group favoritism appears everywhere, but the difference is power. Majorities tend to direct it against minorities like black communities. Who actually does the most racism? Science says it's not just one type of person. Anyone can fall into it under the right conditions. But certain traits make it more likely, especially toward black people. People high in social dominance orientation or authoritarian tendencies are more prone to racist beliefs because they need clear hierarchies and fear change. Many racists come from environments with little intergroup contact, where stereotypes about black people go unchallenged. Importantly, they don't always see their actions as racist. Research shows they often justify it as protecting culture, economic realism, or reverse discrimination against their own group. The psychology of racism reveals it's learned, not inevitable. Babies show own race preferences by 3 months based purely on what they see around them, and those biases grow through family, media, and segregated spaces. The good news? The same research that explains why people become racist also shows how it ends. The most powerful tool is the intergroup contact hypothesis, backed by over 500 studies. When people from different races, especially white and black, interact as equals with shared goals in schools, workplaces, sports teams, or even online, prejudice drops significantly. Anxiety decreases, empathy rises, and stereotypes lose their power. In the US, Project Implicit data shows implicit anti-black/pro-white bias has fallen 26% from 2007 to 2020 thanks to changing norms and more contact. Interventions like prejudice habit-breaking training teach people to catch and replace biased thoughts in the moment. Systemic changes matter too. Desegregation policies, diverse education, and fair institutions weaken the structures that feed racism against black people and others. Here's the hopeful reality from psychology. Racism isn't hardwired into our DNA for modern racial categories. It's a habit built on ancient survival wiring for coalitions and threats, but it's incredibly malleable. Explicit bias against black people has already plummeted in many places. Implicit bias is shifting too. When societies invest in real contact and honest conversations about history and power, racism shrinks. The psychology of racism shows us it's not about bad people, it's about ordinary minds shaped by history and systems, especially in places like the US where black-white tensions have been so heavily studied. But ordinary people, armed with contact, awareness, and evidence-based strategies, are already dismantling it. What do you think happens in the racist mind now that you know the science, especially when it comes to bias against black people? Drop your thoughts below, and if this video helped you understand the psychology of racism better, hit like and share it. The more we talk about this with facts instead of assumptions, the faster we move forward together.